Montalvo Broadcasting Network. Support MBN, Montalvo Broadcasting Network, and shop with us over at Montalvo Store. Go to ebay.com and search in the advanced search. Type in Montalvo Store. Now support Montalvo Broadcasting Network. We have a wide array of books on conspiracy, apparel, and much more. Support your favorite radio station, Montalvo Broadcasting Network, by visiting Montalvo Store on ebay.com.
Tribal, primitive, rustic, Burning Man, punk rock, conceptual subculture, for the edgiest, most cutting-edge designs of jewelry today. Go to etsy.com/shop/conceptual subculture, or one word, either by going to Google or search Etsy, ETSY.com, and type in one word, conceptual subculture. You will find the hottest designs using natural stones with wire wrap rings, rough, raw, genuine, semi-precious gemstone jewelry, solid sterling silver, copper, leather, organite, bracelets, pendants, chokers, men's copper cups with sterling accents, eco-friendly, repurposed, original, one-of-a-kind design earrings. Support MBN by going to Conceptual Subculture on Etsy. Go to Antique Obsessions for the hottest in jewelry, antiques, repurposed, solid sterling silver, one-of-a-kind, handmade by Bruce and Jaja. Go to our Facebook, which is Antique Obsessions, or you can go to Etsy.com and go to Antique Obsessions, one word, or type it into your Google and find us there. Thanks.
If you're looking for the coolest apparel, jewelry, bracelets, earrings, the stylish and hippest clothing around, go to Poshmark.com. Poshmark.com at Anti-Culture. At Anti-Culture. The coolest, hippest apparel on the internet. Poshmark.com at Anti-Culture. Bruce Montalvo.
Continues to spread conspiracy theories.
Penchant for promoting bogus conspiracies as though they were fact.
About his conspiracy theory.
This is CNN, a network of China Broadcasting System.
Bruce Montalvo is the only radio talk show host that's not controlled. You're listening to the Bruce Montalvo Show.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to a very special broadcast of the Bruce Montalvo Show, August 20th, 2019. And on today's show, we have a very special guest joining me. He's an astrologer, writer, social commentator. He has been on the cutting edge of astrology, and he's also been known to be a television psychic back in the day. But he's known for giving his predictions on things like school shootings before they've happened, and Trump, and many other predictions. He's going to join us to talk about psychic abilities, predictions, and the end of times, and of course occult gematria. Joining me is Robert Phoenix. Hello, Robert. How are you?
I'm great, Bruce. Thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for being on. So, Robert, tell us about some of the things you've predicted. I mean, Trump has he's been creepy when he gives speeches. He gives them on certain days that are of significance to the occult. What's your take on that?
Well, so going back to the election in 2016, or the run-up to the election, I started to look at his chart, and of everybody that was in the race, I thought he had the best chance of winning. The only thing that I was concerned about was the political machinery that was connected to the Clintons. And the thing that really, there were two events that really sealed the deal for me with Trump was, number one, on 9/11/2016, Hillary Clinton, for all intents and purposes, expired. I mean, everybody saw her sort of, just drop down to her knees. She got escorted into that, basically what was a mobile nursing unit, which is what she was being paraded around in, all the different events, all the different speaking events and fundraisers. So she basically had a mobile medical unit that was carrying her around. And when she went down on 9/11, it was like, that's it. Right. This is a done deal. Trump is going to win this thing.
I thought that myself.
And of course, we had the October surprise with the WikiLeaks stuff, which sort of put everything over the top. And as far as his kind of occult days, the ones that I'm really aware of is the first State of the Union address that he gave, which was on an eclipse. It was on a lunar eclipse, and it was I think he was only the second president in history to do a State of the Union on a lunar eclipse. And Trump himself was born on a lunar eclipse with the moon in the sign of Sagittarius. So that was a really, really interesting event for him. And it was an interesting event for the country in a lot of ways. But he also had another very interesting moment with the Great American Eclipse, which was in 2017. And that was in August 21st. So we're really just one day away. It would be the second year anniversary of the Great American Eclipse. And it was a very interesting image of him and his wife and his son, Barron. And they've got the glasses on, and he does not. He's staring right into the sun.
That's right.
It's a really interesting image. Now, if you know anything about Trump's chart, he's a Leo rising, and he has Mars in Leo on the ascendant. So it's a very, very prominent Leo chart. And I did an episode on YouTube, and that Leo is an essential role. Having a Leo component inside one's chart is essential to be elected president. I go back to Kennedy, and I go through Carter and Reagan and Bush. And Leo plays a role. I think the only person who didn't have a significant... No, even Reagan was in there. So Leo plays a really important role because it's about royalty, rulership, and I believe you could probably even track bloodlines through the sign. So
you see the symbolism. You see that symbolism in his campaign as well. He uses the lion.
That's right. And if you've ever seen his penthouse in Trump Tower, it is a shrine to Apollo.
Right.
Who, of course, is the sun god. Everything is gold and very kind of Liberace, Italian age, Rococo. I don't think he has the best taste in interior design, but it's a shrine to Apollo. That's what it is. And so he's got this. So when he actually gazed into the sun, with the Great American Eclipse, it was incredibly symbolic. He
was staring at Ouroboros, right into Ouroboros.
Yeah, it's not like he just said, "I'm going to take my shot." No, he was staring into his destiny, or at least that's what he believed. At that time, the destiny was quite dark because the sun itself is an eclipse. It's a black sun, right? And we've been dealing with black sun energies really ever.
Well, maybe Robert he thinks it's a portal and he wants to jump into the future. He thought he could just jump right into the future.
Apparently, he's got all of his uncle's time travel stuff. So
that's right.
But I've always equated Trump with the builder and the creator of the Tower of Babel. And because that's what Trump Tower is. It's like the modern Tower of Babel in a lot of ways. So anyway, there's a lot of symbolism around Trump.
Oh, you can go for days.
And he also has Pluto in the 12th house, and Pluto in the 12th house is a very interesting aspect in a lot of charts. And I've looked at a number of people who have Pluto in the 12th house, and most of them tend to be fairly. That's what I'm looking for. Most of them tend to be fairly famous, and there are two reasons why I believe this is true. Number one, Pluto in the 12th house usually denotes some kind of personal tragedy that sets them apart from the rest of the world. And of course, with Trump, it was his brother, and he has got a really mixed story with his brother. He used to bully his brother. His brother was the scapegoat of the Trump family in a lot of ways.
Was that the one that died of alcoholism or something like that?
Yeah, that's right. The reason why he died of alcoholism is because Fred Trump favored Donald Trump over his brother.
Oh, man. That'll turn you into an alkie real quick.
Yeah, and I think in terms of that family with all the power and all of the kind of, inbred family cronyism, I think that could be very, very difficult. But there's also another piece about that Pluto. It's almost like there's this compulsion at a very deep level to succeed and to be somebody, to sort of transcend whatever is lurking around in the sort of the dark corners and recesses, because that's what the 12th house is of somebody's chart. And what's very interesting about that Pluto, which is also in the sign of Leo, is that it is at the same degree as Jared Kushner's true node. The true node is the ascending plane of the moon, also known as the dragon's head. So Jared Kushner's dragon's head is pretty much right on top of Trump's Pluto, which would suggest that he is almost like a succubi in some ways.
I see. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with occult gematria, Robert?
Yeah, I know a little bit about the gematria. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, I'm looking at. I wanted to ask you real quick. I'm looking at the words that equal 2020 because we're going into 2020 and there's a lot of end times fears. A lot of people see end times signs, and I went ahead and looked at some of the words that It's pretty creepy. It says everything from devil worshiper to violent earthquake. What are your thoughts?
Mm-hmm. So did you just type in the words 2020 on gematria?
That's right.
Yeah. Well, let me see what comes up. I mean, I think gematria is kind of interesting. The one thing is that there's so many variables. Like, it's like sifting through a number of different variables to find something that's interesting. There's other stuff that's not so interesting. But I'm just looking at some of the phrases associated with 2020. Let's see, we've got holy telepathy, as was Joan of Arc.
Right, communication with spirits.
Jesus Christ swinging his scythe. What else do we have here? Highly intelligent beings from Sirius B. Cannabis was made illegal with the rhetoric of lies and racism.
Even devil
I think if you wanted to parse out some of that stuff, I think you could probably find some, apocalyptic imagery. But I do think that there's something about 2020 that is fairly significant. And that goes into some of the symbolism of 2020 and also the relationship to what's happening astrologically. I mean, if you just take 2020 and break it down, you get 22. And 22 is the final card in the major arcana. Right. Well, actually, 21 is, because that's the world card. But 22 goes over to the Fool, so it becomes the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. So right now, 2021 is 2019 rather, which is 21. So 2020 is interesting because it goes to 22, and right now we're in 21. Right. So we're in the world card right now. This is the universe. So this is theoretically the last card of the major arcana. And then when we get to 22, we go to the Fool, which is the Alpha and the Omega, and that's what 2020 is about. And astrologically, we've got a huge eclipse coming up in December, and of course we've got the vaunted Saturn-Pluto conjunction that's happening in January and February, which everybody around the world, anybody who's into astrology, has been looking at this conjunction for quite a while because we haven't seen this at this exactitude for a very long time. You'd have to go back to Martin Luther to find this close of an approximation to this conjunction. And so, what was Martin Luther? It was the Reformation.
Right.
So it's a very interesting time, and if you want to, we can dive into it. What do you think of the gematria? What's your take on it?
I find it, to be pretty accurate. I mean, everything is happening according to it. You see in California, it's the swarm of earthquakes that have been happening there recently, or so we are led to believe that they're earthquakes. It could be some type of government, military, black ops that are going on. Everything. I want to ask you, what are some of the predictions going into 2020 that you would make as to where we're heading?
Yeah, so first of all, the outer planets generally determine the direction of where things are going, but I've really been honing in on the nodes because the nodes have been very telling in terms of the energy, the focus, and what we call sort of the positive side and the negative side of those nodes. So the nodes are the ascending and descending plane of the moon, and they're in sign for roughly about 17 months. And unlike the other signs or the other planets, they actually travel clockwise around the chart. So they start off at the end of their degree, and then they move into the beginning of their degree. So currently, we have the true node in the sign of Cancer, and then the south node in the sign of Capricorn. Capricorn being a sign that's related to, of course, many things. Baphomet. It's related to Saturn. The L, the elite, the hypercube. It's also related to not just Capricorn, but Ascension, pyramids, goats, its own version of the black sun. So it's a very, very interesting sign. And on a mundane level, it's connected to things like corporations and governments. And what we're seeing now is we're seeing kind of the end game of what happened when Pluto went into Capricorn initially back in 2009, which was a very significant event. Two things happened during that time. Number one, there was a massive, and I mean massive, crash with the economy. That, of course, had to do with subprime mortgages. That all happened when Pluto went into Capricorn, by the way.
Wow.
And then after that, the United States government
right now
started to buy businesses. They bought Chrysler. They bought Bear Stearns. They were in bed with Solyndra. And so what we had was the kind of raw, naked revelation of the corporocratic state, which was corporations and governments coming together. Right. And that's exactly what happened. We saw
corporatocracy.
Basically, it was a corporatocracy. And that's what happened. Pluto and Capricorn came in with a bang. It was like, this is going to be the new model. Now, Here we are on the 20th of August in 2019, so we're talking 10 years later. What just came through the news wire yesterday? 188 out of the top 200 Forbes 200 companies have decided to band together and say to themselves and to the general populace that profit is not our sole goal and motivation. What is our sole goal and motivation now? Well, to make the world a better place. Well, what does that really mean, to make the world a better place? Basically, what they're saying is that they're going to forego, theoretically, their bottom line to get into governance. Right? So now what we're seeing the governance aspect coming from the corporations. And at the beginning of Pluto and Capricorn, we saw the government get into the business of corporations And so what we're going to witness over the course of starting in December and going through January and February is the metastasis of the corporocratic state. We're going to see this unholy alliance born before our very eyes. This is where it's all going. And this is the definition of fascism, according to Mussolini. So this is what people have to look forward to.
Right, and the symbols of fascism are on everything. I mean, on our money, on the dime. You flip the dime around, there's the bundle of sticks. I mean, it's in your face. You know, that's how they control the unconscious mind, our minds. You know, Robert. So, Robert, when did you discover that you had psychic abilities?
Well, you know, first of all, let me say this, Bruce. I think everybody has psychic abilities.
That's right.
I think you know,
extent.
And you know, it's a really, really interesting story. I'm sure you're familiar with the Project Grill Flame stuff and the Psychic Warriors,
remote viewing, MK Ultra, yes.
Russell Targ, right? So it was a really interesting story. They had this one guy who was a former LAPD cop who was just this, you know, balls on target psychic, and he dies mysteriously.
Wow.
Like he was their absolute best psychic. And then they did this thing where they randomly picked somebody who had absolutely no psychic ability, or at least they thought they didn't. And it happened to be Russell Targ's secretary. And Russell Targ's secretary was trained by, I'm spacing on his name now. The guy that ran the program, it'll come to me. Anyway, she was trained, and she wound up being as good as their crack psychic who'd come out of the LAPD. So everybody's got psychic gifts and psychic abilities, and they're not that difficult to tap into. So when I was in my 30s, I'd always had interest in, you know, psychic research ever since I was a kid, going back to 12, 13 years old. One of the first books that I found on the subject matter was Sacred Secrets Behind the Iron Curtain. And I saw this when I was a kid, and I was mesmerized by this book and curling photography, and like, this is some cool shit. So I was always kind of in my space, and I was always, you know, guessing things correctly, like numbers between 1 and 5. I was always kind of on. And part of it was because I really had this belief and faith that I had this connection, which is part of the deal, right? If you have the belief in it, it begins to manifest itself.
That's right.
So in my 30s, I was kind of going through a bit of a difficult time, and I studied a bunch of different systems. I studied astrology, I studied tarot, I studied the runes, I studied numerology, and I decided that I was going to, at this one point in time, get a reading with this woman in Berkeley, and she was a terrific psychic. She was an old school trance medium. And you'd sit in the room, and the room began to snap, crackle, and pop. They would talk to you, and talk to her, more importantly. So I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool. And she must have seen something, and she says, well, you know, I'm offering some classes. Would you like to take them? So I said, yeah, sure, that'd be great. So we got into these classes. We started doing psychometry and all this other stuff. I'm like, well, this is really tangible. Something's happening here. I've got some connection to what's going on with this material, and I think it'd probably be helpful if I pursued it. So even more. So I went back into tarot reading. I started to do a lot of tarot reading, and then that led me to ultimately working for one of these psychic hotlines. And it was actually a very legit business. It was run by these two women who were legit psychics. They were based out of San Francisco, and they partnered with a guy who'd worked for Pac Bell Telephones, and he knew all the stacking and all the phone lines and stuff like that. So I began to work with them and do readings with them. This was around, around 1994. And the stuff that came out during that time was for me, mind-blowing. It was almost like there was some remote viewing going on. I was able to describe where people were living and what their husbands looked like. And, you know, 9 times out of 10 was women asking about their love life.
It was like psychic boot camp for you, psychic training.
Yeah, you know, I've worked with people, actually, and to help them sort of get their own stuff switched on, which has been good, and I've seen progress with people. So that's where it started for me professionally, and then it just kind of continued to build itself, you know, through time, and you know, here we are. And I do more sort of astrological based stuff now, but that's definitely a part of it's part of the process, because when I get into a reading, some of the things I'm picking up on are intuitive and not just what I see on the chart.
Right. You never swam with dolphins? Because some people say that if you swim with the dolphins, they give you psychic abilities. I myself got bit by one, so I think I'm like, a little bit of a sea.
Where was that? Where were you swimming?
Well, I wasn't swimming with the dolphins. I heard the Russian military does that. I went to SeaWorld when I was a kid, and I was feeding an anchovy to one of them, and I got bit. And then I was like, "Whoa!"
Oh.
It was like my Spider-Man moment, with the radioactive spider.
Yeah, man, that's special, man. I think you were chosen.
Yeah, I'm starting to think something.
Moment.
Anyway,
by the way, I have swam with dolphins.
Cool.
And I did it back in the 2000s, and it was off the coast of Florida, outside of the Florida Keys, and I have to say there was something going on there in that experience.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something happening, because after I swam with the dolphins, like, everybody was like incredibly nice to me, and like I had this this dolphin energy or something. People just wanted. I remember getting on this plane, and I was sitting in coach, and it never happened to me before. So certainly hasn't happened since. All of a sudden, this stewardess started to feed me mimosas. One mimosa after the other. I'm like, it's got to be the dolphin. This has got to be the dolphin.
It's the dolphin mojo. The dolphin mojo. I wanted to get your thoughts on this. What's going on around the world with the Russian tests that are like blowing up over there. It's radioactive. And then you got maybe the similar exercises going around here. And then in Area 51, they're talking about storming Area 51. I noticed the date. The date, it falls right on the occult holiday of Mabon. So what are some type of maybe predictions or something that you see, is it all intertwined? Something's going on. I think it's fishy.
Well, so again, what we're looking at, like, are the predictive models, or models that give us some insight astrologically. I talked about the nodes earlier.
Yes, I'm there. I'm listening.
Okay, so one of the outer planets is Uranus, and Uranus represents radical change. It represents revolution. It also represents uranium, right?
That's right.
It's connected to uranium. A revolution, uranium, radical energy, radical shifts. And when Uranus went into the sign of Taurus, one of the first things that happened is we had a volcano blow on Hawaii. I mean, that was like, and we were talking about this. I was doing a YouTube stream with one of my students, who's now a professional astrologer. We're doing quite well, by the way. We were talking about this. We were kind of looking at what was going to happen with Uranus coming into Taurus, and I said, well, we're going to get some earth changes. I'd be very surprised if we didn't have an earthquake or we didn't have a volcano, and lo and behold, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Taurus is Earth. It's Earth, right? And so when Uranus went retrograde, what happened? I could see it coming a mile away.
Yeah.
And it came. What happened in China Lake in California came right out and after the eclipse.
Wow.
Right. So we have this eclipse, and it was the weekend before that. I was talking on one of my shows. I said, "Well, here's what's going on. We get this eclipse energy. What you want to look out for? You want to look out for some earth changes. We're going to see some stuff happening. Do not be surprised. We see another earthquake or a series of earthquakes." And lo and behold, that's what happened. Uranus began to go retrograde. And we're part of a Uranus retrograde cycle now. And I believe that's also connected to what's happened, not just with China Lake, but we had the Russian sub that got into trouble off the coast of, Siberia or Kamchatka. And then we just had this missile explode recently in Russia, and there's all kinds of fallout and radiation that's taking place. I mean, it's really a bit. How do I say this? It's a bit troubling on some level.
Oh yeah.
That we're now dealing with this kind of radical, this free radical, with Uranus and Taurus going retrograde, and I think we're going to see more of this. we might even be, and this is what I think is probably being revealed to us, is that we're in some kind of a soft war right now. And there are things that are happening behind the scenes. Clearly, I think we're in a soft civil war. I don't think a lot of people would object to that.
They want that. They want that in order to bring in the martial law. They want us to fight ourselves.
That's right. Absolutely. So they're doing everything in their power to turn us against one another. And they're doing a pretty good job, I'd have to say.
Yeah, damn good job. They're doing it with a lot of manufactured fake news since they repealed the Smith-Mundt Act. You've also been on the forefront of being predicting a lot of these public events, such as these supposed shootings. Does that got something to do with the zodiac and what you're mentioning?
So when I was looking at the cycle of shootings, there's actually an actual post that I have on my website, robertphoenix.com, which is on the home page, and it's basically a map of the different shootings going through the different houses. And I saw that there was a pattern where the style of the shootings was basically starting off with a very sort of second house, sort of Taurus-related sort of theme. And I got up to the sixth house, and I could see where things were going because we went through a whole spate of so-called shootings or these mass events that were centered around children, and that's a fifth house event. And I could see the pattern begin to form itself, and lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. And I said, well, the next series is going to happen in the sixth house, which is the workplace. And then shortly thereafter, about a week and a half, 2 weeks thereafter, there was that weird shooting that happened at YouTube. Do you remember that? It was like a really bizarre kind of shooting.
It was like a tranny gone wild that worked there, a guy dressed in green girl.
Yeah, the thing was just completely bizarre.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what happened. It was like 2 weeks later, there was a shooting that took place in the workplace.
Right.
So, it was fairly evident for me, if I could map it out, which I did.
It can't be a coincidence.
That you could find, kind of where the next stop on the tour was.
Right.
Right? And that, and I think I ended that at the sixth house. The next house after that is the seventh house. And the seventh house represents relationships. So, when you get into relationship shooting, that shit happens all the time, right? People kill each other over love and jealousy all the time.
Yeah.
So that's not anything that...
Or if they overcook the steak,
per se.
One or the other.
Yeah. But the next house after that is the eighth house, which is the house of Scorpio in the underworld. So the last two shootings that we had, theoretically, were at the Walmart, which was in El Paso and on the border. Right? It's a borderline event.
I see.
And what happened, a few months ago, and we had a shooting at the borderline. It was a club in California just after the fire, right? So there's some interesting correlations here. And the club is generally a 12th house shooting. And we saw some of that with the Pulse nightclub as well. So what happened basically the same day or later that day, earlier the next day, is we had another club shooting, which was in Ohio, in Dayton, Ohio. So that referenced the borderline club again, because it was another nightclub shooting. And I would say right now that sort of cycle is not as predictable because it got as far out to the sixth house. And now, we're going to be moving into another nodal cycle in January. And that's when the node shift and the ascending plane of the moon goes into Gemini. And then the descending plane of the moon goes into Sagittarius. So I would look at events that would be triggered around Gemini and Sagittarius. Sagittarius on the lesser side of the equation, and Gemini on the, how do I say this? More, I don't want to use the word positive in the sense that it's all positive, but in a direction that tends to get more traction. Like when the true node was in Leo and the south node was in Aquarius, one of the kind of greatest astrological manifestations of that event occurred, and it was between Joe Rogan and Alex Jones. And Joe Rogan and Alex Jones are complete opposites astrologically.
They broke the glass ceiling, right? The Aquarius. They're going to let all the water in.
That's right. So Joe Rogan is he's born in the month of Leo. He's Leo 11 degrees, and Alex Jones is born in the month of Aquarius. And he's Aquarius 11 degrees. So they're polar opposites. You know, and in terms of ceremonial magic, you know, they love that shit, right?
I thought he was a Sagittarius too. I don't know. Anyway, that's crazy stuff.
No, that's Bill Hicks.
That's where I'm getting at.
yeah. No, by the way, I'm gonna pop a little bubble here. My girlfriend is a dentist, and she actually knows Alex Jones. She knew Alex Jones growing up, and she worked for Alex Jones' father. So Alex Jones is now. That's not to say that there may not be some chicanery here, but that's the guy that she knew when he was a young guy. It's the same guy. So, but I would agree that there's a lot of really high strange with Alex Jones and Bill Hicks.
Oh my goodness! Don't get me started on that.
So what happened was that South Node was in Alex Jones' sign, and what did we see? We saw Alex Jones essentially being sacrificed, right? That's what happened with Alex Jones. He became sacrificed, and then Joe Rogan became exalted, and that's how the nodes work. So now we're moving into Gemini, and that's going to be the true node, or the North Node, and the South Node will be in Sagittarius. I'll tell you what's going to take a big hit. Publishing is going to take a big hit. It is going to take a huge hit. Publishing is going to take a huge hit, and if you haven't been convinced or aren't convinced that censorship is real, just wait to see what happens over the course of the next 18 months.
Oh, yeah, they showed what they can do just with Alex Jones. I mean, they totally turned him into a non-person.
That's right, and that was on purpose, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
That was on purpose. He was a
to
whale,
do it to you.
And they were going to go out, they were going to get the big whale. And then after that, once they got the big whale, the biggest catch on the block, everybody else was going to be small fish, because at that point, whether it was YouTube or PayPal, it's like, well, shit, they got the biggest guy in the ocean. Yeah, who are these other people? You know, and they got through it. He's got no recourse. It's like giving them the keys to the gas chamber. Just go ahead and start walking people in there.
Yeah, that's what they plan to do to all of us, Rob. But anyway, we're coming close to the end of the show. Where can my listeners find more of your work and the amazing research you do with astrology and everything?
I'm over at robertphoenix.com, and I also have a Facebook page, which is where I think you connected with me, and that's the 11th house, and I have a show that I do Tuesday through Thursday, 3 days a week, called 15 Minutes of Flame. That's over on YouTube. I have the Friday Forecast, which I've been doing since 2010, and that's an interview show I do over on YouTube. And on that YouTube channel, I do a Sunday night astrology show for 2 hours. So there you go.
Awesome. Well, it's been great having you on, Robert. If anything happens, like a volcano pops off or something, I'm gonna call you up and at it. See, how'd it happen? I don't know.
Put me on speed, Bruce.
You got it. Thanks, Robert.
All right, take care.
Have a good one. It was astrologer Robert Phoenix joining me. This has been a very special episode of the Bruce Montalvo Show. Be sure to visit us over at Poshmark.com, at Jaja Jewelry, at Anti-Culture. So you go there and we'll give you a super discount if you listen to the show. Go over there and check us out. Wide range of apparel, beautiful jewelry, you name it. You can listen to us every Monday, streaming live, TalkStreamLive.com, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Fridays, 8 p.m. Mountain Time. We're on iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spreaker, iTunes, TuneIn, YouTune in. That's right. We're on YouTube. But you need to tune in to this show so that you can hear all the crazy stuff that's going to happen in the future. Okay, you heard it. All it's in the occult gematria. You've been listening to the Bruce Montalvo Show. Sayonara.
Montalvo Broadcasting Network.